I've gotten to know Tamara Lich over the last year. I really didn't know her. I hadn't met her, even spoken with her before she was arrested. But over the course of the last year, I've gotten to know her fairly well. I've gone on tour with her. We've published her book, which is a national bestseller, just outstanding. And over the course of the last 6 months or so, I've had the pleasure to meet with and speak to Lawrence Greenspon, who's a leading criminal lawyer in the city of Ottawa, who has taken what we all thought would be a case for a couple of weeks. It's now stretching on the better part of a year. And I'm absolutely delighted to bring him on the show now. A man I truly, God forbid I ever get charged with a crime myself, and may it never happen, and it never has. But God forbid if it does. Lawrence, I hope you would take me as a client, because I've been so impressed with your work for Tamara Lich, and thank God you're there for her. And by the way, thanks for taking some time to appear on our live stream. We have about 8,000 people watching concurrently right now. Give me your reaction to this astonishing ruling by the federal court, which caught me by surprise. Maybe you thought it was coming, but boy, I'm surprised. Give me your reaction.
Well, first off, thanks for the very kind words, Ezra. You don't want to need me, but if you ever do, I'm there for you. Okay.
Thank you.
This is, what we've been saying all along. Those of the various organizations that appeared before the Rouleau Commission were saying just this. This was an unnecessary overreaction to what was certainly in Ottawa a peaceful protest, and what Mr. Justice Mosley, who, by the way, is a very experienced federal court judge and has been there for 30 years. He's a former Crown attorney, and he knows of what he speaks. He's found that these temporary, incredibly powerful measures were unconstitutional. And of course, the knee-jerk reaction of the government is, we're going to appeal. But, before they appeal, this judgment from it's 190 pages, it's thorough, it's damning, and they come to the conclusion that we've been saying all along, which is that these emergency measures were completely unnecessary. I had a quick skim of the judgment. I don't even think that there was the kind of evidence that we've heard in the Tamara Lich, Chris Barber trial about all of the efforts by the demonstrators to try and reduce the footprint. I mean, those were ongoing pursuant to an agreement, as you know, which was reached with the mayor of Ottawa on February the 12th. And Chris Barber and many others had already taken all kinds of steps trying to reduce the footprint and the impact of the demonstrators on the downtown core and the residents of the downtown core. I don't even see any mention of that in the Mosley decision. But when you look at that and you look at what was going on almost from the start of the demonstration, the efforts to try and reduce the footprint, there was absolutely no need for Trudeau to do what he did. And not only that, there was some question about, did he even realize, did anybody actually tell him about what was going on in the streets right in front of Parliament? Because, there was a genuine effort on a daily basis. They had actually already moved 40 of the big rigs, had been moved, and this was part of the agreement that had been struck with the mayor. There was absolutely no need for the Emergencies Act, and every reason not to use these kinds of very powerful measures.
Yeah, we spoke earlier with Keith Wilson, who was a lawyer negotiator for the truckers, who was in daily, in fact, you could even say hourly communication with city officials, police officials, mayor's office.
He was.
To proactively, you're using the phrase reduce the footprint. I would say reduce the temperature, reduce the friction. And you said, well, it sounds like Trudeau didn't know about it. A darker interpretation, which I would choose, is that Trudeau absolutely did know about it, and that's why he pulled the trigger on February 14th because he didn't want this peace deal that the truckers had negotiated with the city coming into effect. I think he realized, whoa, I'd better, if I'm going to use the Emergencies Act, I better do it now because everything is getting calmer and calmer. Remember, the Coots blockade had ended in advance of this.
That's right.
So he was running out of justification. I think he pulled the trigger because he wanted to be dramatic like his father had been during the FLQ crisis some 50 years ago. And I think that, and that was, a lot of people had their doubts about that from a civil liberties point of view, but Trudeau didn't even follow the law. We were just going through the law. It had to have a serious violence in the order of a revolution or a war or a true insurrection. Lawrence, was there any violence whatsoever in Ottawa that you know of during the entire time the convoy was there? I don't know of any violence.
On the contrary, I mean, if there had been, the Crown, as you know, has now closed their case in the Lich Barber trial. They've closed their case. You can be sure that if there was any violence, it would have been front and center in the trial. There wasn't any. I mean, really, what the problem was with the demonstrators is, at least in Ottawa, and most Canadians will say this, oh yeah, I'm all in favor of the freedom of expression and right to peaceful assembly. They're all in favor of that. But then, unfortunately, most Canadians will say, yeah, but it lasted too long. It was annoying. It was inconvenient. Well, constitutional, I don't have to tell you that constitutional rights, there's no time limit on them.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that they're called fundamental freedoms, and they're enshrined in our Constitution. And they shouldn't be messed with because the Prime Minister of the day thinks I'm going to look good if I come out tough like my dad. Well, when Trudeau, the senior, said, in answer to the question, what would you do in response to what's going on? And he turned on his heel and said, just watch me. Canadians across the country were going, wow, that's great. He's a tough guy and he's going to deal with this situation. That was not the scenario in February of 2022. It was a completely different nonviolent scenario. There are no cabinet ministers that were being kidnapped or killed. Yeah. Far from it. And what this judgment does is it basically says, look, this was crushing a peanut with a sledgehammer when the peanut was just lying there. There was no violence.
Yeah. Huh. There's a zeitgeist, that's German for the spirit of the times. And a couple of years ago, the zeitgeist in Canada was conformity. I remember when the Democracy Fund got started, there was a tremendous time finding lawyers who were willing to fight against pandemic prosecutions, the lawyers themselves, and many lawyers are contrarian and like being dissenters, especially in the criminal bar. It was very hard to find lawyers who were willing to take on this juggernaut. And I think that conformity was part of the power of it. Oh, you're not an anti-vaxxer, are you? You're not a conspiracy theorist, are you? And I think the trucker convoy sort of broke that fake unanimity. But in the courts, it still was overwhelmingly, the courts sort of upheld a lot of these rules. I feel that today's ruling sort of grants permission to other judges and lawyers to say, okay, wait a minute, maybe we went too far. Maybe the pendulum swung too far. And here we have a sober-minded judge going through it and saying, yeah, it just wasn't enough to justify it. And some of the mania that was here 2 years ago wasn't justifiable. Like, I think back to how Montreal literally had a curfew from 10 p.m. till 5 a.m., whether you were jabbed or not. And people went along with that. That's a kind of madness of crowds. I feel like this ruling is sort of puncturing that balloon and changes the feeling in the air, and hopefully that'll redound to the benefit of Tamara Lich in your trial. I don't know, maybe that's too feelings-ish of a thing to say, but I feel like the national temperament has just changed today. What do you think?
Well, I think that as long as this ruling gets upheld, and I'm quite confident it will be, the matter is going to be, taken up the line. And I think the irony is that, the very Charter of Rights and Freedoms that Dad brought back to Canada is now being has now been successfully used as a way of undermining the son, Justin, his actions in declaring an emergency. And the irony is certainly not lost. But I mean, of course, the government is going to appeal this and make their arguments. I just don't see how it is that with this kind of a ruling, you look back at the Rouleau Commission, you say, well, how was it that at the end of the day there, it was concluded that this was a national emergency that warranted this kind of emergency powers? And this judgment certainly goes the other way. And I in the time that I've had to review it, it seems to be extremely well reasoned and it's thorough. And my hope is that it'll be properly upheld as it moves up to the Supreme Court of Canada.
Well, listen, it's great to connect with you. It's nice to see you. Before we say goodbye, can you give us a 1-minute update on what happens next in the case against Tamara Lich? I mean, I would have thought that this case, I don't even think it should have gone to court at all, but I would have thought it would have been over very quickly. It's now stretching well into its second calendar year. What are the next milestones that supporters of Tamara Lich can look forward to in this court case against her?
We expect to receive a decision from the trial judge on March the 7th. That'll deal with the evidentiary matters of whether the evidence of conversations that Chris Barber had can be used against Tamara Lich and vice versa. This is a so-called conspiracy type of motion that the Crown has brought. There'll be a decision by the trial judge on that. And then March 13 to 15, we'll be bringing a motion in order to deal with the charges. My hope, and then the judge will need some time to rule on that. So we'll stretch into April, May before there's any decision that needs to be made as to whether or not we're going to call any evidence.
Wow. This thing really is, as they say, the process is the punishment. And I was in court briefly, but we've had a Rebel News reporter in court every single day of the hearing, and our friends at the Democracy Fund have been there too, because we think it's a very important trial for many people in the country, and it's important that they get the kind of reports that we're doing. I just want to say one last thing while we have Lawrence on the line. We need to crowdfund Tamara Lich's case. And Lawrence and his two deputy lawyers are on this. They have been on this case. Like I say, it's going to stretch close to a year. And we didn't expect that. No, and so we've got to crowdfund for them to continue on the file. And I would like viewers who love Tamara Lich to go to helptamara.com. That's a special website. If you make a donation there, you actually get a charitable tax receipt because it's going through the Democracy Fund, which is a registered civil liberties public interest law firm. So I just wanted to say that. We've got about 9,000 folks watching this right now. And if those folks haven't yet had a chance to help Tamara, I really believe a lot turns on that case, Lawrence, because they want to convict her and thereby denormalize the whole political movement behind her. Whereas if she's acquitted, which I think there's a very good chance, that will vindicate her in the whole political movement. So that will be as important a case as the federal court ruling today. So I just wanted to mention, if folks are as impressed with Lawrence as I am and they want Tamara to win as much as I do, please go to helptamara.com and you will get a charitable tax receipt. So that money comes out of Trudeau's Revenue Canada, so it's a win-win. Last word to you, Lawrence.
Well, let's see how this unfolds, but you're quite right. It's taken way longer than anybody could have anticipated. But it's not the first time that the fight for freedoms has been on the back of what is a relatively minor criminal charge. We're going to keep fighting, and thanks for your support.
Right on. Well, we will support you. And no regular person could bear this cost on their own, not even a millionaire. A millionaire would plead guilty. Millionaires are smart. They would say, this is nuts. I'm not going to spend my entire life savings on this. I'm just going to plead guilty and walk away. But Tamara Lich is a principled person, but she's not a gazillionaire. The only way this works is if thousands of ordinary people chip in $10 or $20 or $50, which is what we're going to do.